Hi friends, welcome to the Liberty Bunker. Is it worth destroying the economy to contain COVID-19? Is there anything the government could be doing that could contain this virus but not have the economic damage that is almost certainly to happen at this stage? Let's take a look at a few stories and get an idea of what's going on in the world. So this is from the gov.uk website, official government information. So high consequence infectious diseases. Let's take a closer look at this one. So as of 19th of March 2020, COVID-19 is no longer considered to be a high consequence infectious disease, HCID in the UK. So let's take a look. What is the definition of an HCID? What is it? In the UK, a high consequence infectious disease is defined according to the following criteria. Acute infectious disease, typically a high case fatality rate, may not have effective prophylaxis or treatment, often difficult to recognise and detect rapidly, ability to spread in the community within healthcare settings, requires an enhanced individual population and system response to ensure it's managed effectively and efficiently. So COVID-19 doesn't fit that description. However, we are doing a hell of a lot of damage to the economy to contain. I'm not saying we shouldn't be. I'm saying we should probably tread carefully in what we do. Now, Big Short, great film. If you haven't watched it, you should. There's this clip at the end of Big Short, or The Big Short. Let's just listen to it because it's quite enlightening.
Do you have any idea what you just did?
Come on, we just made the deal of our lifetimes. We should celebrate.
You just bet against the American economy.
Fuck yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah.
Which means, if we're right, people lose homes. People lose jobs. People lose retirement savings. People lose pensions. You know what I hate about fucking banking? It reduces people to numbers. Here's a number. Every 1% unemployment goes up, 40,000 people die. Did you know that?
No.
Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
We were just excited. Just don't fucking dance.
So you go for whether that statistic is correct. I mean, I have looked into this. There's various studies that have looked into this, more based around America, because that 40,000 represents a population size of around America, 350, 400 million, whatever it exactly is. No one knows the true population of America, of course, same as the UK, because so many undocumented people in both countries. Now, the argument is for every 1% unemployment goes up, 400,000 or 40,000 people will die. There's a lot of studies on it. I don't truly believe any of these studies because people that do that kind of research, like into poverty and like deaths associated with markets, tend to have an agenda. But it's going to be true to say that the higher unemployment is, more people will die. So let's take a closer look at what else is going on in the world. So this is from the Telegraph. Up to 50 million Americans could lose their job after record rise in unemployment claims. US unemployment will hit a post-war record high as the world's biggest economy is ravaged by the coronavirus pandemic. Economists warned after millions of Americans filed for benefits in the space of 1 week. It suggests US unemployment has already surpassed 5% after sitting at a 50-year low of 3.5% as recently as February. Economists warn that this only represents the start of weeks of layoffs. They could see the jobless rate approach 13% by May, higher than the 10% seen during the financial crisis of 2009 or the 10.8% record set in 1982. Well, we knew this was going to be the big recession, right? We knew this was going to be a depression. No matter how much money they print, layoffs are going to be unavoidable. So the US jobless rate is going to go from where it was around 3.5%. Economists are predicting up to about 13.5%. So that's a 10% rise. If you take the statistic as being true at face value, for every 1% increase in unemployment, you're going to see about 40,000 deaths. You're looking at 400,000 Americans dead just by the increase in the jobless rate. Now, of course, we can't take these statistics as being gospel because what's included, what's not included. I'm guessing it's including things like sort of suicide if you had a business all your life, and the coronavirus recession just absolutely destroys it. Suicide's going to go up when people don't have many other options in life. They turn to alcohol, they turn to drugs. You get people overdosing, you get people just basically giving up on life. I mean, I think most people that live in the world understand that happens. The worse an economy is, you're going to have associated deaths with that. Whether it's 40,000, it could be more than 40,000, it could be less. I don't know. You can do your own research. There are quite a lot of studies on it. They seem to vary from what I've seen. 20,000 to 40,000. So maybe if you want to pick a number in the middle, something like 30,000. Now, of course, that's for the US population. US population is probably something like 5 times bigger than the UK. So if we looked at something similar in the UK, for every 1% unemployment goes up, you're probably looking at something like 8,000 extra deaths if you use the same model. Some people argue, you know, that welfare system is more generous in the UK, so maybe we won't see 8,000 extra associated deaths per 1% increase in unemployment. But it's still certainly going to be there. Like, suicide is going to go up. You know, people are just going to get into despair, start turning to alcohol, start turning to drugs, and then the associated health implications and deaths associated with that. So the argument now is it worth ravaging the economy to just contain this virus? Now, hindsight 2020, what we should have done back in late January, early February was doing good quality track and trace like they did. I mean, South Korea let the situation get too far out of control before they caught up with it, but they did manage to catch up with it at some points. Now, probably besides just the ensuing recession, capitalism is also really going to struggle now. You know, capitalism has been the driving force of why the West has such high living standards. You know, it's the free markets. You know, also associated with free speech. You know, because you need relatively high levels of free speech in a country for people to go out and, you know, innovate and look at different ways of doing things. If you have a very structured regime society, you know, it's why stuff produced in communist countries is just crap, right? Because they don't have a free market, they don't have free speech, so there's no incentive to make things better. The best they can possibly hope to do is just try and maintain the standard of living they have. So capitalism, like, is pretty much true to most people, unless you're very extreme in your political ideologies, that, you know, free markets have driven the living standards higher in all countries that have adopted it. Now, we are potentially seeing the end of capitalism with this coronavirus situation. Now, there's 2 outcomes that are going to happen from the coronavirus situation. You can guarantee a recession, a global recession is here basically. Maybe it may not be here on paper. You know, the data collectors may not have compiled 2 negative quarters of GDP growth yet, which is the technical definition for recession. But assume a recession is almost certain. If it's a mild recession, people are going to go away from this, and especially the big government statist kind of people are going to say, look, we had this huge crisis in 2019, 2020, and government solved it. So every time there is a crisis in the future, people are going to call for big state intervention, you know, large amounts of money printing, QE, modern monetary theory. It's all going to be back on the table, and it's almost certainly never going to go away. And that's if the recession is mild. If the recession is very bad, like I'm assuming it's going to be, and a lot of people assume it's going to be, like aka just a depression, people are going to turn around and say, well, the government didn't do enough. They stopped. They did what they could, but it wasn't enough. They didn't print enough money. They didn't have enough state intervention. They didn't nationalize enough companies. So if it's bad, you're just as screwed. So whatever comes out of this situation, capitalism is now going to come off bad, which is a long-term worry for the future prospects of not only the UK and America, but the entire world. So it's not a particularly good situation to be in now. I think, you know, the academics, the university professors, the Marxists in universities will now use this for every time someone studies economics or even history at a university. It's the same with the Great Depression, right? The Great Depression was the first real time that the government and the central banks, like the Fed, stepped in and really tried to mitigate how bad the recession was. And that turned out to be one of the worst depressions in history. No one really talks about that. All people talk about now is how much good the Fed did and the US government did. There's strong arguments. I mean, it's almost probable that everything the Fed did and, you know, the central planning of the US government did during the Great Depression made things worse, but no one talks about that. And now when history looks back on 2019, 2020, they're going to talk about, well, how wonderful UK government was and the US government are. They're probably doing all the wrong things, and all they're doing is just killing capitalism in the process. So unfortunately, you know, if you have kids and you want long-term prospects, ultimately off the back of this, you may have to consider moving out of Western countries, maybe to the forward-thinking nations, Singapore, South Korea, Hong Kong, Taiwan, maybe one day even China. That's going to take a while, obviously. But let me know your thoughts and opinions on this one. Are we doing so much at this point that we're just going to kill the economy? And could we see something like in the UK, 8,000 deaths for every 1% unemployment goes up. And is capitalism dead? Is there any way for capitalism to come back from this? Because if the recession's mild, they're going to say, hey, look, state intervention's brilliant. We're going to have to use it in every recession, every problem that comes up. And if the recession/depression is very bad, they're going to argue we didn't do enough. Next time, more money printing, more QE, MMT to infinity, helicopter money, whatever you want to describe it as. So those are my thoughts and opinions today. Jason from Liberty Bunkers signing off, and I'll see you in the next video.